Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Inner Voice Show. I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine and have Sean in studio. This is a show about you, about what matters most in life, our minds, thoughts, feelings, actions, relationships, and our fulfillment in this beautiful journey of life. So in this show, I'll bring you the latest research about the effect of the screen time and social media use on teens' well-being. And then I will speak to Kristi Hugstad, the author of Beneath the Surface, a teen guide to reaching out when you or your friend is in crisis. This book is amazing. It's been written not only for the teens, but also for the parents and adults and the teachers. So you'll get a lot out of it. She's an amazing grief counselor, and we're lucky to have her, and it's wonderful. So you can call us, actually, if you also wanted to talk to me or Kristi Hugstad. You can call the studio line at 951-922-3532. Be sure to listen to my podcast on iTunes and Stitchers. Tell people, please share it with your friends. If you like a topic, if you like the podcast, please share it with people. Give us some, writing and telling us how you like it. If you don't like something, call me or email me. Let me know what it is that you don't like or how you suggest for the program to get better, what topics you like to hear. And I'll be sure to listen to you when you email me. We'll be right back with the tip of the week.
Join the conversation every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific for Inner Voice Heartfelt Chat with Dr. Foojan. Dr. Foojan is a radio and TV host, international speaker, psychotherapist, life coach, and the author of Life Reset, the awareness path to create the life you want. She brings you the latest research and interviews with experts in the field of cognitive sciences. Anyone who loves to grow and create growth for humanity gets a voice on this call-in show. Inner Voice Heartfelt Chat with Dr. Foojan. Monday afternoons at 3 p.m. Pacific on Smart Talk KMET 1490 AM and on KMET1490AM.com.
So this is the tip of the week. This week, I've been experiencing that when I procrastinate and push what is inevitable to the last minute, there are many consequences that I have to endure. Have you ever experienced knowing that you have to do something? You have to do it. You know you got to do it. And there's no way that you can get away from it. And the reality won't change no matter how much you deny it and look the other way. And it could even be a matter that you have chosen, like a project, school, going to school, moving, relocation, change of job, redecorating your home or office, anything. So what causes or promotes procrastination? Not really being interested in the task, maybe, having emotional baggage around the subject, feeling anxiety about the unknown result. The task is not exciting enough. You're not doing it for someone else. You're doing it for someone else and not really for you. Or there's a feeling of loss that you have to experience, but you don't want to. The comfort of not doing it trumps the benefit of doing the task or anything like that. You can probably have thousands of reasons of why you procrastinate, right? But you know better than I do that no matter what, you will have to pay a price when you postpone a task to the last minute. The consequences could monetary, having to pay a fine, emotionally, hurting someone, having a lot of stress, losing opportunities, and many more. And you've probably count all the prices that you have to pay, the costs you've had to pay when you've just procrastinated and put things in the last minute. So it's important to know what you are losing and what you are gaining so that you can choose the price as it comes to you. You know you have to do it, so might as well plan it, schedule it, and as the slogan says with Nike, just do it. Okay? You will pay less of a price, I promise you. We'll be right back with research about the overall time of social media and screen time for teens.
Hello, I'm Dr. Foojan, and I have great news for you. I'm offering a special time-limited offer to anyone who's interested in online therapy or coaching sessions. I've developed the awareness integration model, which allows in only 12 weeks to raise your self-esteem and confidence and let go of your thoughts and emotions that produce depression and anxiety for you. So call today to schedule your online session and save $600. Call me today at 818-648-2140. That's 818-648-2140. Or go to www.foojan.com.
So here is the research. Overall time on social media is not related to teen anxiety and depression. 8-year study shows screen time isn't the problem. The amount of time teenagers spend on social networking sites has risen 62.5% since 2012 till now and continues to grow. Just last year, the average time teenagers spent on social media was estimated as 2.6 hours per day. Critics have claimed that more screen time is increasing depression and anxiety in teenagers. However, new research done at Brigham Young University, published in Computer and Human Behavior Journal, found that the amount of time spent on social media is not directly increasing anxiety or depression in teenagers. In an effort to understand teenagers' mental health and their social media use, researchers worked with 500 youth between the ages of 13 and 20 who completed once-yearly questionnaires over an 8-year span. Social media use was measured by asking participants how much time they spent on social networking sites on a typical day. To measure depression and anxiety, participants responded to questions with different scales to indicate depressive symptoms and anxiety levels. These results were then analyzed on an individual level to see if there was a strong correlation between the two variables. At age 13, adolescents reported an average social networking use of 31 to 60 minutes per day. These are not that much. Watching adolescents, you think about 8 hours versus 31 to 60 minutes per day. These average levels increased steadily so that by young adulthood, they were reporting upwards of 2 hours per day. This increase of social networking, though, did not predict future mental health. That is, adolescents' increase in social networking beyond their typical level did not predict changes in anxiety or depression 1 year later. So researchers state, we spent 8 years trying to really understand the relationship between time spent on social media and depression for developing teenagers. If they've increased their social media time, would it make them more depressed? Also, if they decrease their social media time, were they less depressed? The answer was no. We found that time spent on social media was not what was impacting the anxiety or depression. Mental health is a multi-process syndrome where no one stressor is likely to cause the depression or anxiety. The study shows that it is not merely the amount of time spent on social media that's leading to an increase in depression or anxiety among adolescents. It's not just the amount of time that is important for most kids. For example, 2 teenagers could use social media for exactly the same amount of time, but may have vastly different outcomes as a result of the way they are using it. The goal of this study is to help society as a whole move beyond the screen time debate and instead to examine the context and the content surrounding the social media use. Researchers have 3 suggestions to use social media in a healthier way. Be an active user instead of a passive user. Instead of just scrolling, actively comment, post, and like other content. Limit social media use at least an hour before falling asleep. Getting enough sleep is one of the most protective factors of mental health. Be intentional. Look at your motivations for engaging with social media in the first place. If you get on specifically to seek out information or to connect with others, that can have a more positive effect than just getting on just because you're bored. So the second study actually is about screen time before bed, right? So it says screen time even before bed has little impact on teen well-being. Data from more than 17,000 teenagers show little evidence of relationship between screen time and well-being in adolescents. The study done in Oxford Internet Institute and University of Oxford, published in Psychological Science, casts doubt on the widely accepted notion that spending time online, gaming, or watching TV, especially before bedtime, can damage young people's mental health. Researchers analyzing three distinct different data sets, which included improved measurements of screen time, found little clear-cut evidence that screen time decreases adolescent well-being, even if the use of digital technology occurs directly before bedtime. The research found that adolescents' total screen time per day had little impact on their mental health, both on weekdays and weekends. It also found that the use of digital screens 2 hours, 1 hour, or 30 minutes before bedtime didn't have clear association with decrease in adolescent well-being. Even though this is often taken as a fact by media reporters and public debates, unlike other studies, the Oxford research analyzed data from Ireland, the US, and the UK to support this conclusion. The researchers used a rigorous methodology to gather how much time an adolescent spends on screen per day, including both self-reported measures and time use diaries. This is important as many studies are based solely on self-reported digital technology use, even though recent work found only 1/3 of participants give accurate accounts of how much time they spend online when asked after the fact. The researchers were also able to create a comprehensive picture of teens' well-being, examining measures of psychosocial functioning, depression symptoms, anxiety, self-esteem, and mood with data provided by both young people and their caregivers. Additionally, the final of the 3 studies conducted was pre-registered, meaning that the researchers publicly documented the analysis that they would run before they analyze the data. This prevents hypothesizing after the results are known, a challenge for controversial research topic. So because technologies are embedded in our social and professional lives, research concerning digital screen use and its effect on adolescent well-being is under increasing scrutiny. To retain influence and trust, robust and transparent research practices will need to become a norm. I must say that yes, an hour or 2 of social media per day is a norm. I think that most of the time when people are talking about creating depression has to do more that it becomes like the teens are not doing anything else except constantly being in social media during the day in between classes and, hours after they come back. And they get also involved in a lot of the relational issues that come up in the social media. And those are the relational issues that are creating a lot more anxiety and depression. And I'm so glad that we have our guest. Her expertise is with teen, and her book is about teens. So we can talk also about this a little bit with her. So don't go anywhere. We're going to be back with Kristi Hugstad, is the author of Beneath the Surface, a teen's guide to reaching out when you or your friend is in crisis. She's also the author of What I Wish I Had Known, which addresses her own husband's suicide. She's a certified grief recovery specialist and a grief and loss facilitator for recovering addicts at South Coast Behavioral Health. Kristi frequently speaks at high schools, and she's also the host of Grief Girl podcast. You can visit her on thegriefgirl.com. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be back with Kristi Hugstad.
Have you ever wished you could just wake up one day, reach across your nightstand, and hit the life reset button? Let's face it, the struggles and frustrations of everyday life leave millions of women and men around the globe yearning for a new way. And the new way is right here in Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want by Dr. Foojan Zeine. You can get it now at Foojan.com or Amazon.com. Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want. You deserve it. Hello, I'm Dr. Foojan, and I have great news for you. I'm offering a special time-limited offer to anyone who's interested in online therapy or coaching sessions. I've developed the awareness integration model, which allows in only 12 weeks to raise your self-esteem and confidence and let go of your thoughts and emotions that produce depression and anxiety for you. So call today to schedule your online session and save $600. Call me today at 818-648-2140. That's 818-648-2140, or go to www.foojan.com.
Join the conversation every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific for Inner Voice Heartfelt Chat with Dr. Foojan. Dr. Foojan is a radio and TV host, international speaker, psychotherapist, life coach, and the author of Life Reset, the awareness path to create the life you want. She brings you the latest research and interviews with experts in the field of cognitive sciences. Anyone who loves to grow and create growth for humanity gets a voice on this call-in show. Inner Voice Heartfelt Chat with Dr. Foojan. Monday afternoons at 3 p.m. Pacific on Smart Talk KMET 1490 AM and on KMET1490AM.com.
Welcome back to the Inner Voice Show. I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, and I am so excited to have Kristi Hugstad, who's the author of Beneath the Surface, A Teen's Guide to Reaching Out When You or Your Friend is in Crisis. Welcome to my show, Kristi.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Kristi, you wrote this book for teens, and you are a grief counselor. Tell me what just got you to want to write for teens.
Well, 7 years ago, my husband, Bill, completed suicide by running in front of a train. Oh. And for a couple of years prior to that, he had exhibited many signs of depression and suicide, but I didn't know that. I didn't take them seriously, and I was just really on a mission to fix him so that I could have my old husband back. So after his suicide, I decided, I have a couple choices here. I can either be a victim of my circumstances and wallow in self-pity and be depressed, or I can take that pain and I can use it to help others. And of course, that's just what I decided to do. And the way that I can educate and help other people is by teaching them the warning signs and risk factors of mental illness, depression, suicide, so that people will get help and reach out, because my husband didn't do that. And as you know, there's a huge stigma associated with mental illness. And the biggest task that we have is to abolish that stigma, because that's costing lives. So if we're going to get rid of that stigma, we have to start with our youth and start those conversations so that our young people and our teens grow up without that, and they will have normal conversations about how they're feeling, and they'll embrace showing emotion. So that's what inspired me to start with the teens, is because a lot of the older generations have already bought into that stigma. Mm-hmm. And to change that on a permanent basis, our kids have to grow up differently. And that starts with our youth.
Absolutely, because also the ratio shows that the teens, which are people who are going to high school and early years of college, are really at the risk of high level of depression and highest level of suicide attempts. So it's very important for that group to not only not stigmatize depression, to be able to learn how to ask for help, but also for teens to know how to support each other when a friend is going through that. And now with all the school shootings, the grief is all over the place. So the depression is part of that. And again, having the ability not only to ask for help for yourself, and then also how to recognize this in a friend and be there for them, and how to go through the grief if something happens and you're losing a friend for different friend or parent, like your husband. So what was it that you learned through this grief?
Well, first of all, I learned that there are no stages of grief, because my husband had been talking about suicide almost on a daily basis. So when he reached a point where he actually couldn't take it anymore and he ended his life, I was not in denial. And I learned that this buying into those stages of grief are so misleading, because when you reach that fifth stage of acceptance, it gives you the impression that you should be done and that you now are done and you should move on. And other people may make comments to you like, well, you should be over it by now. It's been 7 years. And grief doesn't work that way. It's a roller coaster of ups and downs. And your emotions repeat themselves. Like even 7 years later, Thanksgiving is coming up, and that was the first holiday I had without my husband. And I'm already starting to feel some anxiety and making a plan for how I'm going to handle that. So sometimes the more time that passes, the more you miss them. And it's different and it's unique for everybody according to the relationship they had with that individual. So it's so important to not think there are linear stages of grief. And I like to think of them more as common responses. One of the first things I felt was guilt. Mm-hmm. And, that's not listed as something that's normal to feel. But and in talking to other people that have experienced traumatic losses, I start to wonder if there is such a thing as death without guilt.
Mm-hmm. I think that I think the guilt part shows up in the bargaining stage. I'm not, by the way, stuck in the Kubler-Ross's stages of, and for people who are listening to us, I think you're referring to Kubler-Ross's stage of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But even reading Kubler-Ross, I knew that after the stage of denial, which when it breaks, it actually breaks. You can't go back to denial. The other stages, so the denial and acceptance are different, but I think that the anger, bargaining, and depression are not linear, and you keep going back and forth between the three. And part of the concept of guilt shows up in all three. It shows up in the anger in some sense, and then it shows up in the depression stage, and it shows up also in bargaining. And bargaining, what we mean is what if? What if I've done that? What if the doctors did that? What if so-and-so did that? So all of the what ifs show up, and anger is more of it shouldn't have happened. Why me? And it's the world's fault. And the depression is it's my fault. Why didn't I do something? And how come I didn't see it? How come he kept saying it and I didn't see it? So I do agree with you that are not linear. And I do agree with you that just because one person, created that stage, that all of us as human beings go through that stage. So I totally agree with you. But definitely people go through stages. And I also think that although we go into an acceptance finally, that missing someone is a whole different concept. Like you don't have to be in the process of grief to miss someone. I think that those are different stages of living without someone. And I think that you're right. When someone loses their child, when someone loses the role of, a husband who is there, and those roles are not replaceable, or we choose not to replace them, it's different. And I think that when it comes to parents, like there's an understanding that at one point we are going to lose our parents. So we are in a different way with it, as if it's a natural concept. But when somebody commits suicide, or they're younger than you and they're not supposed to go, we don't take it as natural. So the way that we are with it, we deal with it very differently than if we thought someone, was died of natural causes, like they've lived their life until 90 and they passed away. Although we still go through grief, but a lot of other pieces might not show up, or it's easier to say it's just a natural process and I can let it go. What are your thoughts about that?
I think, at least for me, at first I just really focused on accepting the loss and that my husband had died. So I was accepting it. And then my biggest task was working through that pain.
Yeah.
And that's where the roller coaster ride starts, because some days you're doing pretty well. And then the next day it could be hard to, even get out of bed. And then trying to adjust to my life without him, because my friends have changed. We used to go to dinner parties. We used to do things. And my life is completely different now because I am no longer part of a couple. And the most important thing, and that's where I'm at right now, is that I am finding that lasting connection with him. And my place where we went for walks and we sat on a park bench near our home and talked, I visit those places. And so instead of thinking I just have to accept it and move on, I've worked really hard in keeping him in my life and finding things that are symbolic of the life we had together, and then making that a lasting connection. But at the same time, I'm also moving forward and working really hard on my new life without him.
Yes. So that is part of the acceptance.
Yeah.
And I'm sensing that the acceptance is not a one-way concept. It doesn't look the same for everyone. It looks different for everyone in how they want to accept and how they want to incorporate that into their life.
Yes, absolutely. But I just think it's important for everyone to understand you are not going to get over somebody that you loved. And so embrace that and find a lasting connection and take that with you in your grief journey. Because I think society makes us feel like you should just be over it, which to some people means that you should forget about it and just get on with your life. But that's not what works. You find that lasting connection and you take them with you.
Yes. And I think that's more of a Western society. Eastern societies deal with death of a loved one in a very different way.
Absolutely.
They have rituals which are for, 3 days, 7 day, 40 days, 1 year, which everybody, the whole community comes together and still goes through the grief. And then after that, the anniversary is kept going. And the way that they incorporate the person as a family system is very different than society in the Western world thinking, okay, come on, move on. We got to get to work. Come on, that's next and next. So I totally understand.
Exactly. When your workplace is maybe giving you like 2 to 4 days bereavement leave, right? And then boom, you're back to work. So culturally, we all grieve differently. But I think it's important for everybody to get as much support as they can from the people in their community and their friends and family, and whatever that means for you.
And Kristi, how do you think teens are dealing with this differently? So what is that important thing that you wanted teens to know when they are in the midst of this type of a crisis that was, the reason you actually wrote the book for teens? Well,
I think the teenage experience today is so different, and I'll speak for myself, but, with technology, it has changed their life experiences. And for me, when I would get home from school, even if I was being bullied, and in the 9th grade, I was bullied, but at least when I got home from school, I had a safe place. My home and my family was that safe place for me. So if somebody wanted to continue to bully me, they would have to call my landline, and probably my father would answer, right? So I had that safe place. That's not the case anymore. As a matter of fact, if you're being bullied at school, when you get home, now everybody else is out of school, nobody's in class. And that's actually when the bullying kicks up through cyberbullying. And they can reach you, and you as a teen, your world is so small, and all that matters is what your peers think about you. That's your life. And when you're on technology and you're on social media and you're comparing yourself on Snapchat or Instagram to your peers, and you're not getting those likes and you're not measuring up, your self-esteem is so low that no wonder kids are thinking, I can't go back to my world, which is my peers, because I am so unpopular and I am being bullied to the point where I don't want to live. So that's the difference in the culture that our kids are growing up. We didn't have, technology is offering us some wonderful tools, but by the same token, it's creating a really toxic environment for a lot of our youth.
And by the toxic environment, you're meaning that when they are in a closed group of a social media, that whatever happens, that one of them can bully within the same closed society, which is their social group, and they won't talk to anyone because they feel ashamed, they feel humiliated, and teen years, especially the early years, are just years of really low self-esteem. Biologically, it's a years of low self-esteem, and the yearning to be loved and approved heard by your peer and not be shunned and kicked out really, really affects them. And if they can't go to their own friends because they feel anxious, and if they can't go to the parents because they figure they won't understand, my parents won't just understand it, just tell me to get off, don't worry about these friends, and I can't just let them go, how am I going to go the next day to school? So they'll go into an isolative place. An isolative place is the worst place that they can be. What are your advice or perspective that you offer parents or educators, teachers who, they love their teens and they want to be part of their life and support them?
Well, I think that we all need to get together and be on the same page and be supportive of our youth. And we need to address it in school. We need to have it addressed at home. All of us as adults that have loved teens in our life need to decode all of these warning signs so that we are there to help our youth. For example, I have a couple nieces that are kindergarten teachers, and at age 5, they are teaching kindness and inclusion and acceptance. And if somebody is sitting and not playing with somebody else on the playground, the other kids are learning to approach them, include them. Kindness, which sounds so basic, is not something that is coming naturally. And to start teaching kids at age 5 to look out for each other, I think that's so important. And that needs to be passed on from grade level to grade level. So by the time you're in junior high, let's say you're being bullied in school. When I was in school, nobody stood up for me because they didn't want the bullies turning on them. And what's happening now is instead of the peers stepping in to defend somebody that's being bullied, they're standing back and filming it on their iPhones and posting it on social media. So, I just think that the schools also need to get involved and talk to kids that bullying can kill. And it's not.
It does.
Yes. And it needs to be taken seriously in the school systems and at homes, because these kids don't have anywhere to turn. And that's why, like you said, they're isolating and they're turning to technology, they're gaming, they're doing anything they possibly can to escape that pain.
Mm-hmm. And I think part of the way that also I would suggest for parents to look at it is sometimes, we become very overprotective as parents, and all we want to do is to just remove our child from that space. And although sometimes it's really needed to remove them from that space, but we got to that is their world. I mean, they're going to have to go back to that school. They're going to go back to people who are among their friends. So just removing them might not be all the solution. And even if you remove them to another school, it might be that they miss all of their other friends. So they still go through a grief and loss because they just missed a lot of other things. And it's working with also the teen to see what works best for your teen in the circumstances that they have, instead of making the choice only by yourself. And I think that when the teens and people I've had in my office as a family therapy between teens and parents, when teens experience that at least their parents understand them, they hear them. They understand all the areas that is, and they might not be articulate a lot of times. They might not know how to say whatever it is. But when you, as a patient parent, sit down and listen and figure it out together, you're giving them a lot of empowerment. You're the one then, raising their self-esteem, knowing that they are there. They're the one who are moving forward, but you're behind them and you're supporting them and you're looking at hoping and opening up the critical thinking for them. And I think those are very important. In your book, you also talk about that depression is a thief and a liar. What do you mean by that?
Well, depression is a disease. Depression is an illness. And those thoughts that your depression is giving you are not who you are. So that's what I mean by it is a liar. You can't listen to those thoughts. They are not who you are. And the fact that I call depression a thief, I mean that it steals your joy and it steals the hope that you can eventually get your joy back. So I wanted to stress that depression is an illness, just like if let's say you were diagnosed with cancer, you wouldn't go to bed and pull the covers up and hope that in a couple of weeks you were better, right? I mean, it's not going to pass. The first thing you would do if you got that kind of diagnosis with a physical ailment is you would go to a professional that specializes in the disease that you have, and you would get treatment. And that's the same thing with depression or other mental illnesses. You have to understand that it's a disease, it's a thief, and it's a liar. But the good side is that there is treatment. And when you know that you can get help and that what you're experiencing is treatable, that breeds hope. And then it helps to start the process out of your depression. So I think we need to change how we view depression and not think, well, there's nothing I can do. I'm just stuck with it. I just have to wait till it passes, because sometimes it doesn't.
And I think that viewing depression for teens and the way that the symptom shows itself is very different sometimes with the adults. I think that when you see depression in adults, sometimes it's a lot of sadness and isolation or a lot of anger. With teens, you also see sometimes a lot of numbness where they're just, kind of like walking around, but they're not engaging in things. That they might not just be sitting there crying all the time, but they might have bursts of anger, but a lot of I don't care, moving into I don't care, losing all motivation, not wanting to engage. And when they engage very, very like in a shallow way. So sometimes I think that parents also see the teenagers as just like they're just being teenagers. They don't see that could be a sign of actually depression that they're going through.
Well, and also a difference that may make parents or teachers think that their teen is doing okay is as adults, we tend to withdraw from everybody. And that's not always the case with our teens. They will withdraw probably from their family, but oftentimes they will still maintain a connection with their peers. And that might make you draw the conclusion, well, at least, he's still hanging out with his friends and he's still, texting or whatever, so he must be okay. So there is that marked difference too between adults and our youth.
I also have sensed that sometimes the parents minimize the depression in the teen because they see that they do this extreme like cutting of self or talking, what they call emo. And they say all of this thing, but then side by side at one point, they're laughing, going through some other concept with their friends and going to the parties and all of that. And then I think that these two become very confusing for the parents, which is, I think they're just faking it because obviously, as you said, if you see an adult being depressed, it looks different. So this kind of vacillation between an extreme does not appear. They won't see the underlying causes of what's going on with them. And a lot of times the teens are also confused about their own emotions. And sometimes they also use especially now, marijuana or other drugs in order to calm themselves down. And then therefore the depression gets masked by the drug use that happens in starting, teen years, starting from 13 or 15, it's a little bit of an epidemic at this point.
Well, teens do not have the ability or the tools to know what to do with their low mood or their depression. So a natural reaction would be, okay, I need to numb this pain. And how can I do that? So I'm going to turn to drugs or alcohol because maybe that will make me feel better. They're looking for something to change their mood and make them feel better. So that's a natural progression. Also, when you were talking about that feeling of numbness, I don't feel anything. I just feel like I've flatlined. So a lot of times, self-harm starts happening, and so a teen may start to cut themselves just to feel or to get that dopamine rush to raise that feel-good chemical in their brain. So a lot of the issues that I talk about in the book are issues that actually can result in depression, and then that depression can lead to suicidal ideation. So that's why it's so important to decode all these signs. And importantly, don't just say, well, this is all confusing and I'm not sure because my son is still hanging out with his friends. If you see these warning flags, do not ignore them. Take them seriously. Get your child help, because you know what? I tried to do that, but deep down initially, when my husband was exhibiting all these warning signs and risk factors, I didn't really think he would take his life, because to me, that was stuff that happened to other people. Right? So now my message is, hey, don't ever brush it off as teenage angst. Step in. And I also think it's really important how you relate to your kids and how you broach these topics. Like you were talking about, you can't just say, are you using drugs, or are you getting high, or, are you drinking? Because of course, then you're putting them on the defensive, and their knee-jerk reaction is, Mom, what are you talking about? Of course not. And of course, they're probably lying, right? Right. So your tone is so important on how you breach these topics. Like, notice a change in behavior. Like, hey, Jason, I noticed lately that you've been spending more time in your room, and you're on your computer more. And as your mom, I love you, and I just want to know if everything's okay. So the way that you approach your child is so important, and it's really critical that you don't put them on the defensive, because then they're just going to shut the whole thing down.
And I've even noticed, Kristi, that when you even say that in such a beautiful way, that most of the teens right at that time, they'll tell you, no, I'm okay. But that sticks to their mind, and you'll probably see about an hour or so, or the next day, they'll start coming and start conversing, and they'll give you a little bit of it first to see what you do with it. My friend, da-da-da-da-da-da, and they'll watch you to see how you react. And if you're calm and, you're empathic and all of that, then they'll give you a little bit more. And they'll test you until they see that, oh, she's not going to freak out. Everything's going to be okay. So I might as well say, whatever's bothering me. And that's how it usually shows up. Even when you say it with the most beautiful way, sometimes teens don't just, offer it immediately.
And I think that's such a great point, because you, as the adult or the parent or the teacher, you have to realize that is the perfect timeline when you want to have that conversation with a teen. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the right time for them. They might be absolutely exhausted and they can't just have one more conversation. So it's important that you pick a time where you have their undivided attention, or you're holding them hostage, like in the car, and you have a 30-minute drive, or they're in bed and you're sitting at the foot of their bed. But you may get the response, that one-word response that you get really tired of, like, nah, I'm fine. And don't be discouraged by that, because like I said, just because it's convenient for you at that moment to have that conversation doesn't mean it's the ideal time for them. So then just say, I get it. I know you're exhausted. let's keep the lines of communication. And when you're ready to talk, just know that I love you and I'm always here because you are my world. And leave them with that. And then a couple days, they might come to you and say, hey, Mom, remember, when we had that talk and I said I was fine? Well, there is something I want to talk about. So now they're coming to you when the time feels right for them.
Yeah. And you got to recognize it, because not everybody says, do you remember? They'll just blurb out something. And then if you don't remember what they said, you're going to, kind of like diffuse the moment. And then they might go back into isolation. So it is tough to have teens, Kristi.
Oh, yeah. But you have to realize that having those tough conversations are not something to check off your to-do list.
Yes.
It's ongoing, and it's not going to be, boom, that task is over and I'm good to go. I mean, that is ongoing. So absolutely, it's really tough to help navigate your child's emotional health. It certainly is.
It's tough to be teen, and it's tough to have teens. So it's just, it's about, 5-6 years in the middle that I think that I always say teens come to your life in order to hold you on integrity. Basically, that's their job, to hold you as parents on integrity. So give us some coping strategies that you offer in the book with someone who's struggling with depression, and what are some warning signs that you've seen and you've experienced, in your life with your husband and with people you work with as a grief counselor?
Well, the main thing that I wanted to stress in the book is, you have to be a great listener. Listen to your friends. Let them know you're there for them. Be compassionate. Let them know that you're going to walk the journey with them. But if you have a friend that says, I've thought about taking my own life, please don't tell anybody. I don't want to get in trouble I don't want to end up at the counselor's office. I don't want to get in trouble with my teachers or my parents. I don't want a big deal made out of this. That is not the time to honor that secret. So my main point is, tell an adult you trust immediately. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to handle it. And if you are the one that is experiencing any of these warning signs or risk factors, please also tell that adult that you trust and reach out to get help. And it may not be your parent. It may be your friend's parent. It might be the school counselor, a teacher that you trust, somebody at church. And I know for me, when I go in and I speak to the students at schools, a lot of times it's me, because I'm none of those things. I'm just somebody that cares. So that's the main point that I want kids to know, is you can't handle this on your own. None of us can. We cannot do life alone. So please reach out. Some of the warning signs, and the ones that I recognized in my husband, the withdrawal, the isolation, the feelings of hopelessness. He even talked about suicide. Everything was an opportunity to take his own life. I was cooking in the kitchen and he walked in and picked up a knife and pretended to stab himself. Or we were walking around the bluff area and he said, let's jump together. So there was this constant talk of suicide. And the best way that I can describe it for parents or teachers, your teen, and in my case, my husband, started slowly becoming somebody I no longer knew. I remember thinking to myself, who are you? I don't recognize you anymore. And for teens, the declining grades, the skipping school, the changes of friends. Now they're hanging out with, kids that are known to drink or do drugs. They're not showering. They're not taking care of their appearance. They're staying in their room. They're on technology as an escape from the depression, hour after hour. So all of those things are warning signs, and we all need to work together to help save each other, to help educate and save our teens, because we can't change something we don't know. And if we don't know the warning signs, we can't help people reach out.
Mm-hmm. You also have a podcast, Grief Girl.
Yes.
Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, I cover all different kinds of grief, from somebody that is grieving their addiction Now they're sober and they're grieving their drug of choice. They're grieving that lifestyle, their peers. So I've had heroin addicts on there with it. Well, also have a huge message of hope. I've had people on that have had a miscarriage. So they've lost, a child. So my podcast covers all different kinds of grief, from suicide to children to drug overdoses. So I really want to reach out to the communities all over the country and start a platform for, you know what, you're not the only one that feels this way. There are other people that have lost a child, that have lost a spouse, whose kids or siblings have overdosed, and kind of bring everybody that common ground to know that they're not alone.
Yes, and I think that's a great service that you're doing. So everyone, please go to thegriefgirl.com, thegriefgirl.com, and check out the book, and also check out the Grief Girl podcast. And they can get from Amazon, right? The Beneath the Surface, A Teen's Guide to Reaching Out When You or Your Friend is in Crisis. You also have written another book, What I Wish I Had Known, which this one addresses your husband's suicide and all that you have gone through with, with your own grief in that level. So they can find both of them on Amazon, I'm assuming, but also they can see it also in thegriefgirl.com.
Yes, both books are on my website. And What I Wish I'd Known is the story of my husband's suicide and what we went through with his depression, and 10 tools for getting through your grief journey, and specific examples of what I did. So they're available on my website, my blogs from the Huffington Post and Elephant Journal. If you want me to speak at your school, all the information is on my website.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on to my show. It was a great pleasure to have you. And everyone, don't miss this book. It really supports you and your teens. And trust me, your teens need support, and you need support. And Kristi, you also said you wanted to make sure that people knew that the book, the Beneath the Surface, has also really supported a lot of adults, which they find themselves in it. So it's not just for the teens and their parents or teen issues, that when the tools that are there are so rich that you as an adult can also learn a lot from it and help the teen inside of you, not your inner child, but your inner teen. And you could definitely do that. So thank you so much for coming. And for all of you who are listening or watching us, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And until next week, bye-bye.
The Inner Voice Show is a dialogue between the host and the listeners about their relationships. This show is not an attempt to assess, diagnose, or treat any mental health or illness condition. Please consult your physician, psychiatrist, or psychotherapist for personal matters.
News, talk, and sports for the Inland Empire. AM 1490 KMET, Banning, Beaumont, Redlands.